Spider-Man No Way Home is directed by John Watts. It stars Tom Holland, Benedict Cumberbatch, Zendaya, um, Alfred Molina, William Dafoe, and among others. And this is the third film in the Spider-Man trilogy that was established in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the 27th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. And this story, it deals with Peter Parker pretty much having to clear his name after the whole world discovers who he is from the events of the last film. And not going to go into too much detail, but if you've pretty much seen from the trailers, he tries to get Doctor Strange to help him be able to have the world forget that they know the identity of him as Spider-Man, and essentially it creates pretty much a problem to where they end up basically bringing in previous villains that were from the previous Spider-Man films from the other franchises. And it's up to Peter to pretty much having to stop all these villains that come after him. And I'm going to leave it there because there's a lot of stuff I can't really talk about with this film. But here's some backstory. Now, I've always been an avid Spider-Man fan growing up. He's always been considered my favorite Marvel character of all time, and my favorite Marvel hero of all time. And I've just always, as a kid, always grew fondly of the original Spider-Man animated series and also the Spider-Man films, especially with the original Sam Raimi films, well, mainly the first two movies. And then as the movies went on, it seemed to me that we were kind of going in that phase after Spider-Man 3 that they were really struggling to get really a good Spider-Man movie for a while because, well, even after the second one, that it seemed like it took us a long time to really get where we needed to be. And I remember enjoying I remember liking The Amazing Spider-Man, but I wasn't really like the biggest fan of it after years later, as it kind of grew over me. And then I was, if you've seen me and Eddie's review of the second Amazing Spider-Man 2, it was one of those movies that was a colossal disaster and probably my least favorite of the entire franchise of Spider-Man that have Spider-Man in it. And then when word got around that Disney got the rights to use Spider-Man in their property of the MCU, it got me really hopeful for it again, and ever since his appearance in Captain America Civil War, I've come to really enjoy Tom Holland as Spider-Man, and I've really enjoyed the way that he started out just as, the character started out as still in high school and everything, and still trying to learn his way as he goes along. And then as the other films in the franchise, not including Infinity War and Endgame and all that, the solo films that Spider-Man had with Homecoming and Far From Home, I really enjoyed them a lot. I thought that they really brought a new way of bringing the character into more, different type of situations that we have seen him previously before, while still trying to go through this, phase of still trying to be a lot more, getting closer to being more independent like he was in the comics and everything. Because even in both of those films, it was still him coming off the heels of, following his role model of Iron Man. And I really enjoyed the movies because they not only gave us great villains, but I really enjoyed the way that we really are starting to get a slow character arc build that we later finally get in this one. And so after going this one, I got so much expectations going on, especially all the returning faces of the villains that were coming back from previous films, and even coming back with some villains that we previously saw that could probably give them another chance to really have them work better in a movie like this in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so upon seeing the film, I can honestly say that I was quite blown away by this movie. I think out of the Spider-Man films that we've seen, out of the three with Tom Holland, this is by far my favorite. And out of the overall movies that involve Spider-Man, well, not that just are the solo films, not including Endgame and Infinity War, I gotta say, it might be tied up there probably with Spider-Man 2 as my favorite of the live-action films. I don't know, I mean, there's certain things I like Spider-Man 2 a little more than this one, and then there's things I like this one a little more than Spider-Man 2 is. So they're kind of even as far as which one I'd rank more. But to get my pros out of the way, I really enjoyed Tom Holland in this. I thought he was not only great as usual, but I appreciate the fact that we got to really see a lot more of an emotional side to him, like we got to see in his parts in Infinity War and Endgame, and he really gets to showcase a lot more of Peter Parker and as Spider-Man, a lot more, and you get to see him a lot more in points where he feels a lot more fierce and a lot more aggressive at times, and it really builds a lot more of the arc that we've established in the other films, where he's actually starting to be more on his own, and he's starting to get things in order to the way that we come to know him from, like that we know from Spider-Man. And I'm not going to go into detail, but they actually do build up a whole lot more stakes this time that really got me a whole lot into where the character was actually going and his journey. Let's just say all bets were off in this one, because they really do a great way of fulfilling his arc in this film, and in a very satisfying way. So he was fantastic as usual, and I love the rest of the cast too. Benedict Cumberbatch's always great as usual. Dr. Strange. I did like Zendaya. I remember when I first watched Homecoming, she was one of my least things I didn't like about, but I've come to really grown to really attach to her character throughout the series. And I think that she, once again, gets to really get some moments here that are not only funny at times with her and Ned, his friend as well. But they do get some little small moments here that I thought she really showcased a lot of her performance-wise that came out of it, that I thought really worked. And I've come to really enjoy her chemistry with Tom Holland in each of these films, and it really pulls through with her and her romance with Peter. And so I really enjoyed her, and I also got to really appreciate the villains this time again. What can I say? I mean, this is not a spoiler. If you've seen the trailers, you already know they're back. Alfred Molina is great as usual again as Doc Ock. It's great to see him. And again, I'm trying not to go, I'm going as little detail as I can, but let's just say that they do some things with the villains that I didn't really expect them to really do much in this, that I think was a really great fresh start. Was a really great way of twisting things up a little bit that we haven't really gotten much in the other films, and especially with William Dafoe coming back as Norman Osborn. Let's just say that I loved him in the original Spider-Man, the first one, and I still thought he was great. But I will admit that this one, as far as his performance, I think he topped it from the original film, because in this one he gets to really show a lot more of his taunting, aggressive side and more like torturous way of basically taunting Peter and stuff, and really going out of his way to really try to destroy Peter in this. And I really appreciate that they were going out of their, like, they really showed how menacing he was this time. And I really appreciate also the way they gave him the look that was more closer to the comics, as in this time, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but let's just say that you get to see a little bit more like he looks like from the original comics, like with the well, if you've seen from images in the trailer, it shows him with like a hoodie that's kind of purple looking. I think that was a great little nod to the comics that I thought really worked, and I'm not gonna lie, I do appreciate that they brought back the original costume in the film, but I will admit that looking back on the original film, at least the first film, I always did kind of find that original costume that he wore in the original film was kind of outdated now that I think about it. But it's good to see him still come back in that costume, because it's still consistently what he looked like from the first film. And with that being said too, the rest of the villains I thought were great. Some of them aren't quite as much like used like I thought they would be. Like, you had Sandman and you had Lizard come back, and then you also had Electro. But the one thing I really appreciated this time was that they actually made me really get into Jamie Foxx's performance a lot better this time than how he was compared to Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I appreciate that they kind of changed up a little bit of his motivation. I'm not gonna go into really much about what it is, but it actually served more of a purpose this time for me that I think they really fixed. And I prefer the yellow look that he had, because I was never really a fan of the Sith look and the blue looking thing that he had in Amazing Spider-Man 2. I'm glad they fixed that in this one as well. And there are a couple points where he did have me kind of laughing at times, and I thought Jamie Foxx did a great job in this. And throughout the rest of the story, I really got to appreciate how they were really trying to go into a lot more about Peter's journey of where he needs to go through and everything with stopping the villains. But they bring up a lot more things that, again, I wish I could talk about, but let's just say that when the third act happened, well, I'd say, yeah, when everything, as the movie goes along, it starts to really get a lot more like surprises and a lot of things that I was really blown away with, especially with a lot of the action that takes place. That's very well crafted, and a lot more that showcases a lot of what the villains can do. and a lot of the visual effects that they use are, for the most part, are very spectacular. And it really did get to a point where it seemed to me that they were trying to really give us a lot more of things that we saw from the previous films, and trying to basically fix everything and give actual closure to a lot of events that we've also had in previous movies as well, that I think really worked in this movie. And it's got me really excited what they do with the next film coming out, and also with the new Doctor Strange movie that's coming out next year, with everything that unfolds and how the plot unfolds. Now, if there is some minor cons, I will say that some of the comedy, a couple of points did look like it felt a little tonally off the way it played out in a couple of scenes, and not every joke did land at times, but I was still laughing and go along with it for the most part. There were a couple points where Ned and Zendaya's MJ could get a little jokey at times that I didn't really laugh too much at. But there were other times when, you know, there's more humor that's present that I laughed my ass off when certain things that some of the characters would say at points, and there are some noticeable CGI at points too. That's pretty not, well, typical in the MCU film. In the MCU movies, there is some noticeable CGI that I wasn't really too big on at points, but I thought they still worked with for the most part with the CGI really well. So overall, I will say that this movie was fantastic. I have really, other than those minor things here and there, I still really found the movie a whole lot of fun. And even though there's some things that they could have there are a couple, and plus also just going into a little bit of plots, some of the things that they bring up that's in kind of the way they bring back certain villains, I think kind of creates, it's more of a nitpick, but it kind of creates some things that aren't very questioned necessarily, that you kind of question yourself a little more, like how they were able to really do certain things, which, again, no spoilers, I'm just saying that the way they bring some of the villains back, it does also create more questions of how the events essentially play out in the actual way they do it and everything with the actual multiverse. But I'll leave it at there because there's so much that I cannot talk about with this film. So with that being said, I'm going to give Spider-Man No Way Home a phenomenal grade on the Film Freaks meter. This is definitely going to be on one of my favorite films of the year. And for those of you who have also seen Spider-Man No Way Home, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it, and also the other MCU films, and also the other Spider-Man movies as well. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.